Hi, good evening, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce the keynote tonight. I'm going to stand in for Senator Hatch in introducing the keynote and then doing a little bit of Q&A. I'm a little apprehensive about doing this, that I might mess up, because the keynote is not only an accomplished technology veteran, he's also my boss. So I'm going to ask for your support as we go through this, that I don't jeopardize my family's livelihood and my career. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Shanatu. And I actually learned some things about him as we prepared this brief bio. Shanatu joined Adobe in 1998. At the time, he ran all of the product and research and development. So you'll hear from Shanatu in a minute, but intellectual property and innovation is really at the core of who he is. He's been Adobe CEO since 2007. Before that, also serving as Chief Operating Officer. He has a vision for Adobe's future, and that's part of the reason that we're here today, and I'm here with you. He drove the acquisition of Macromedia in 2005, Omniture in 2009, and 13 other acquisitions just in his time as CEO. He really has a passion to do the right thing by our customers. You'll hear about the customer centricity and what he does. Adobe serves over 2/3 of the Fortune 100, and we've got about 11,000 employees across the world. Shanatu has a keen ability to cut through data points and get to the core and the essence of any issue, and has led the transformation of several of our businesses. These are reasons why really Shanatu has been successful in leading Adobe into our 31st year of operations, and why Adobe's brand is number 79 on Interbrand's top 100 global brands. Shanatu is a member of the U.S. President's Management Advisory Board, which was established in 2010 to provide advice on how to implement best practices, including the application of technology on matters related to the federal government management. He also serves on the board of Pfizer, Dell, and the advisory board of the Haas School of Business at Berkeley, and is the president of the board of the Adobe Foundation, which provides philanthropic initiatives around the world. He has 2 sons, 2 dogs, and he has one of his dog who tweets. And he's really, really close to a scratch golfer. So all really, really impressive statistics. So I'm excited to sit down and spend a few minutes with Shanatu. So without further ado, let's welcome Shanatu to the stage.
Thanks, Brad.
So Shanatu, on behalf of the UTC, welcome to Utah.
Thanks, Brad, and thank you all. It really is an honor to be here tonight. When Senator Hatch called and said that he'd like Adobe to participate and me to participate, it was one of those offers that you can't refuse. He's just done so much, and he was gracious enough to spend some time with me earlier this week, and I know he has more important things, I think, to
There's a few things going on.
You know, Brad said he was apprehensive. I just have to let you know that we actually spent the whole day doing business reviews, and I think I was on the questioning side, and Brad was actually answering it. And I said, Brad, what are you going to talk to me about this evening? And he said, wait and see. So I think I'm the one who's apprehensive right now, Brad.
So just think about me for the next 30 minutes as not someone who reports to you, and then we'll be fine.
But you do realize that changes again tomorrow morning.
What happens in Salt Lake City stays in Salt Lake City. So one of the fun things that about working for Adobe and working in Utah, Shanatu, is very few people actually realize the legacy and the history that Adobe has in the state. So from your perspective, talk about Adobe in Utah.
Sure, and I think when people talk about our gorgeous building, which, by the way, I think is absolutely the best Adobe building in the world. The truth actually is that Adobe's history and heritage in Utah actually goes back to its roots of its founding. It was nice to see John being recognized, John Warnock, one of the co-founders of Adobe Systems, and actually John's a native. He went to school, I think, here in Olympus High School. Went to school at the University of Utah with all of those other amazing graphics researchers, and I think he still has a place here. So I think the roots of Adobe in Utah go deep.
And I mentioned some of the acquisitions that you've made as CEO, and one of the ones that I think a lot of people in the room are probably aware of is the acquisition of Omniture. And it's now been hard to believe, but it's almost 5 years ago. So time's moving really quickly. But what drove the Omniture acquisition and the investment not only of that company, but here in the state?
Sure. The company actually, John Warnock and Chuck Geschke, who were the two co-founders, I think they always believed in making sure that we constantly reinvent ourselves. If you think about Adobe's history, and I think most of you are familiar with the fact that we help create the world's content. So I don't think there's a newspaper, a magazine, a website that you might go to, the video that you're experiencing on your mobile phone where a piece of Adobe software hasn't actually touched it and created it. But the company was first formed when we invented PostScript and the entire era of desktop publishing. And today we take for granted that we can print anything that we see on a screen, but that was the first fundamental innovation of the company. I think you're all probably also familiar with PDF, which was electronic documents, and I think that was the next evolution of the company. And I think 4 or 5 years ago, when we thought about what was happening in technology, the move towards mobile phones and mobile devices, the fact that people were thinking about cloud computing and how they can get access to all of their data and content independent of where they were. And we thought that instead of consuming video on the television, you'd be consuming video on smartphones or on tablets. I think it was important to us to really think about what role Adobe would play in the future of this content. And I think we had always played a role at the front end of creating that content. But we felt like there was a much larger opportunity, Brad, to play in the entire content lifecycle. I like to say when the web came along, Adobe certainly helped create web pages, but the much larger opportunity was creating websites. And I think we were determined not to make that same mistake again in terms of the lens that we took to understand what opportunity Adobe had. And what we thought was that, while we were always known for art, and everything that Adobe does is about enabling people to be creative, that the science and the data associated with it would be incredibly important. And really helping deal with that entire content lifecycle, from creating that amazing piece of video to delivering it as NBC or CBS and then monetizing it with the right ad, we felt that a data platform would really be critical. And it was not something that we had expertise in, and so clearly we wanted to partner or be part of Adobe, the leading provider of analytics in the world. And now everybody talks about big data, but it was clear to us that Omniture had created the best platform for data in the world, the amount of transactions they consumed. And so we thought that it was the best opportunity to combine art and science. And as you know, Brad, because Brad really helped sell the deal after the deal was consummated, I think a lot of people scratched their head and they didn't quite understand what a company like Adobe that was known for front-end desktop software was doing with everything to do with data. But that was really the vision, to say, there's going to be a confluence of art and science. And if Adobe didn't step up to do that, somebody else would.
And so so people didn't get it at first. But you mentioned in your commentary around the art and the science, and Adobe, Adobe's known as a creative company. So what's the blend in technology today? To be a great technologist, have a great company, what is the interplay between art and science from your perspective?
Well, I think from my perspective, all of us as consumers, at the end of the day, there's an overload of data. And if there's an overload of data, I think every one of you wants to find a way through the clutter of data that exists. And our mission as a company has always been, how can we deliver digital experiences? How do we transform the world through digital experiences? And we thought the interplay would be, if you can create this content that's relevant to you, that's appropriate to you, and that's delivered to you any device when you want, that there'd be a large opportunity for that. And it's actually interesting when you think about how you sometimes spend a weekend. I find myself with my 2 kids, and there's something going on TV, but they probably are watching a different game on a smartphone, and somebody else is watching a tablet. And I think that's where the world's going. It's this consumption environment where you want the right piece of content wherever you want, and you actually get irritated if you can't see it. And so I think that's the interplay that we're trying to figure out. How can we deliver that in a seamless way, and how can we help people monetize it? The publishing industry is going through, as you know, massive transformation. Digital dollars are moving to dimes. The video industry is going through massive transformation. And if we can enable that to happen, we think there's a big business opportunity.
And so just in terms of, for the organization or for the folks that are here tonight, you acquired Omniture. What's happened to the business since the acquisition?
Well, this is a leading question, clearly, because I think the vision that Brad and Josh and the folks from Omniture and the entire team here had was to create a billion-dollar software as a service business. And that was the mission that they've set for ourselves. We said in the quarter that we just finished, in Q3, that we're on a run rate to be a billion-dollar SaaS-based business, which, thank you. Which is one of the fastest software businesses, as you know, since you manage it. And it's growing at 25%. So I think we have seen success way beyond our initial expectations. And the real opportunity that we now see is all of marketing is moving online. Every business has to think about what's their online presence and how do they spend their money wisely in marketing digitally. And I think that's the opportunity for us. But it has been a runaway success.
So I'm going to change directions a little bit on you, because give us a little bit of sense for Shantanu, not the CEO Shantanu, but your background. You have some interesting story about how you ended up kind of where you are. So share a little bit about where you came from, how you ended up at CEO of Adobe, going way back. I think you had 2 career options from what I remember.
Well, I'm originally from India, Brad, as you know, and I grew up in a family where my father ran an industrial plastics business, and my mother was a professor of American literature. And I was very fortunate, had a great education, but I always wanted to be a journalist. The thought of being able to write and communicate was what really drove me. I edited my school magazine and things like that. But my father was an engineer and felt like I should pursue engineering. And in those days, my brother was an engineer as well. And so the sort of notion of go west, young man, and get a higher degree was actually too hard to pass up. And so I came here, I got a degree in computer science, and I've been in the Valley ever since. And so and vicariously, I'm still in the communication business or the publishing business. It's just I'm not doing it, but I get my gratification from seeing the millions of people who are using our products who are communicating.
And this comment is nothing against anyone in the room who's in the publishing industry or a journalist, but in terms of the choice, in terms of the growth of the sectors, you chose the right sector. Technology versus journalism. I think you chose the right one. But
they're both related. It's art and science, right?
Yes. I'm going to get some tweets about that last comment. Okay, so I'm going to do another, before we get in, I want to talk about transformation, how you view innovation, but I want to do a little bit of a lightning round where I give you a choice of an either or, and you just have to, you answer the question. And these are hard-hitting, tough questions. So first one, cricket or baseball?
That's an easy, that's a layup, that's cricket.
Come on!
Cricket is baseball, done right. And it's 5 days, and at the end of 5 days, you don't have a result. What's wrong with that?
I don't even know what to say, actually. All right.
Try it one day.
Okay.
Or over 5 days, actually.
Okay, so one thing, Shantanu, I think you've learned about the state is we've got some a rivalry between a couple universities here, but there's a rivalry that your family's a part of. You have a split family. So the question is, for you, Stanford or Cal?
Cal. I went to Cal. What Brad's referring to is my son went to Stanford, but it's Cal. Now,
Okay.
Stanford versus Utah tomorrow. It is Stanford, I'm sorry. But, Stanford versus Cal, that's an easy one.
Okay, you just made about half the audience not so happy.
I hear they beat BYU, though.
Okay, all right. So the other question I have for you is, there's a rumor in the industry that cycling is replacing golf as the way that people network and how they engage. So, cycling or golf?
Golf.
Okay, so we're disagreeing pretty much. Okay, so Android or iOS?
Android.
Okay. Fitbit or Nike Fuel?
I have a Fitbit, so I have to say Fitbit.
Okay. And this is, so you had a startup as well. The next question is startup or big company?
Both. I want to be a startup. I think in all seriousness, the big challenge that companies like us have, as you know, Brad, how do you keep that startup culture, the entrepreneurial, anything is possible environment in a large company, and that's why I want both.
Okay, so let's use that as a lead-in. So you talk about thoughts on innovation. How do you think about innovation? What is innovation? And big company and startup. You had 2 startups from what I remember, and talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think first I've been very fortunate to live in Silicon Valley and have the access to the kind of resources that people have and innovation. I think it's really what makes this country amazingly great. And from my point of view, I think innovation is really all about being unhappy with the status quo. And I have this fundamental belief that in business, if all you're trying to do is preserve the status quo, that's a failed business strategy. And so I think, we definitely believe that innovation comes from every part of the company. Nowadays, it's not just about technology innovation. You have to think about business model innovation. You have to think about go-to-market innovation. And in all honesty, and part of, I think, what makes the relationship so great with the facility here is innovation's happening in every zip code as well. And I think companies that can really figure out, with the internet, how do you take advantage of the talent all across the world? I think that's what's going to be really important. But, there are a couple of things we believe in our heart very dearly at Adobe, which is every business has an S-curve. And so there is a maturity model that you have to think about. And, that's just the nature of the beast. Every time, honestly, you try to do something new in a company, the antibodies come out because all of the power is with the products that are currently making revenue, and so you have to sponsor innovation, and I know you sponsor a number of things like Project Primetime that you're passionate about. And so I think innovation is really about sponsorship as well and providing a nurturing environment. And the last thing I would say is innovation is about celebrating failure as well. If you create an environment where you don't celebrate failure, people are not going to take risk. And I think one of the things we always talk about is it's easier to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. And so I think a culture of innovation, I think in all of these companies is really critical. And as we constantly are reinventing ourselves, we have to keep reminding ourselves of that.
So you talked about business model innovation. And one of the things that if folks in the audience aren't aware is Adobe a year ago made an announcement that the Creative Suite, which is the flagship product at Adobe that has Photoshop and InDesign and all the products that everyone uses, you couldn't walk into Best Buy and buy that anymore. You can't buy perpetual box software. The model is changing, and that's a $2 billion business for Adobe. So what drove you to what gave you the thought that, hey, now's the time to actually completely change the way that we transact business with our customers in a $2 billion business?
Well, first, Brad's being modest. When he says you, what he really means is we, because as Brad was a fundamental part of the team that helped make that decision. But Brad's right. I mean, we have a very, very successful business with our desktop applications that have been really the hallmark of the PC era, products like Photoshop or Acrobat or Illustrator. And a couple of years ago, we really recognized that the pace of innovation for these desktop products was slowing down because the traditional model for software was that you could upgrade your products every 12 or 18 months. And that really provided a significant opportunity for small startups to be able to come in and compete against you because they could move at a much faster pace and they really had nothing to disrupt. The second thing we recognized was that in order to attract a whole new generation of customers, that the upfront pricing of the products was not going to enable us to attract a new set of customers who are far more likely to be able to pay for it on a subscription basis rather than pay for it upfront. Piracy continues to be, unfortunately, a huge issue for Adobe, as you know. Our market share in countries like China and India is great. Our revenue is not so great because everybody just uses that software. And so we really had to rethink the fundamental model of how we deliver software. And as you point out, it was a pretty important strategic decision for us. But again, we put the customer in front. We said we would be able to innovate at a faster pace. The engineering team would be able to have a canvas by which they could deliver new upgrades, new functionality at any time. And we recognized that we would have to be really transparent as we went through this transition with the financial community to really show them why this was a better deal for customers, for Adobe, and for our shareholders. And while it's early, as you know, we have, I think, one of the fastest growing software as a service desktop businesses. We're not done yet. We have to reimagine the creative process. We have to think about new tablet applications. It allowed us, as you know, to deliver some really new hardware. Adobe has never been in the hardware business, but we delivered a new stylus and we delivered a new a ruler because we believe that tablets are not just going to be consumption devices, they're going to be creation devices. And it's crazy that you need a mouse to draw as opposed to a stylus. So I think it's really opened up the possibilities of what we can do. And we're not done yet. We have to continue to execute, but I think we're off to a good start.
So what's the measuring stick you use to measure success at Adobe? Is it revenue? Is it stock price? Is it how do you as CEO measure success?
I like to think about impact. I like to think about impact, and I like to think about customers, Brad. Because I think at the end of the day, if you have impact, and we've had such a profound impact on communication of every form, and I think if you have happy customers means the employees are delivering great value and they're pleased. So I get my gratification from seeing what customers do with our stuff. And I think, virtually everything follows.
Good. I have a question for you. The governor talked about this, and Rich Nelson talked about this. Education. How do you think about education? Education broadly, STEM education. As CEO of a large company, how do you think about the next generation workforce? We met with some really fantastic seniors and juniors who are here tonight that are thinking about what they do next.
Well, every opportunity that I've got in my life has been as a result of my pursuing education, and so it's hard not to get choked up and think about the opportunities that people can have in this country if they have access to education. And so, when we talk about the potential of what education can do to people's lives, I mean, I can't think of anything that has a larger magnitude. Education actually helped me in more than one way. The first day when I was doing grad school, I met my wife. So the pursuit of education has actually helped me in more than one way. But
well done.
I think in all seriousness, I think investing in education implies that you're going to create an environment and a culture where you're going to attract people from all over the world. And I think that that's really what we have to continue to aspire to. And education is a key part of it. I know people talk about STEM, and I think STEM is absolutely critical, because of the focus on technology and math. But I think it needs to be modified, and I think it needs to be STEAM and arts. I think sometimes when we talk about STEM, we forget about arts, and arts I think is just as important. I mean, creativity is just as important, and I think this notion of not allowing people to be creative while they're also learning the basics. So I'm a big believer.
So my wife who's here tonight, she already was a Shantanu fan, but the arts comment, I think you may have just won her over. So it's going to be at my house. Just do whatever Shantanu tells you to do. So just last question. We talked earlier that your youngest son just started first year of university. So you're an empty nester now. Congratulations, or I'm sorry, I don't know which one it is. But what you said something around the college admission process that I wish I would have known before my kids went to college, how I could help them best prepare to go do that. So my question to you is, what do you wish Shantanu of 6 years ago, as you were an incoming CEO, what do you wish you knew then that you now know?
That's a good question. First, if I may, Brad, I want to go back 30 seconds to the education comment as well. And I think the other thing about education, and it's not directly related to STEM, if you think about industries that have been disrupted, virtually every industry in the world, financial services, certainly retail, technology has been disrupted. And I think, what we have right now today with technology and the ability to have widespread access to education, irrespective of where you are, what social strata, I think that is going to be the next big revolution that actually happens. And my younger son, as you know, is at Brown. I think it's criminal in some sense that only the number of students who get into those top colleges. And I think we all owe it to figure out how we can use online education and what needs to happen in technology to actually transform how many people have access to education. And so I just wanted to say that as well, because I think it's, I just think that's a massive opportunity. I realized 6 years into this job, how little I knew 6 years ago. And I think it's always learning. But I would come back to three things. I would come back to three things in many ways. I mean, the first thing I would come back to is, in all of our jobs, I think we can get so caught up doing things that may not have the kind of impact. And so, that old story of if you have a rock and if you have gravel, if you put the rock in a bottle first, the gravel will fit. So I think focusing on really what's important and what you have the most impact. So I try and think about, what really will have impact in what we are trying to do, rather than focusing on things that make you feel like you're, busy or contributing. So I think that's one thing that's really important. I do believe this notion of nothing is permanent, and so if something is really successful today, there's somebody out there nipping at your heels trying to, create businesses. Brad's helped create $1 billion business, and what he will not say is that it's now attracted every single other large company in the industry who looks at what he's been able to do and wants to get a piece of it. So I think this notion of, what Andy Grove called be paranoid, and how do you create that sense of paranoia, especially when a company is perceived to be doing well. So I think that's the second thing that I spend a lot of time on. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing, especially for a company like us that's in the intellectual property business, Brad, is our people. And if you can create a culture where people want to work, we like to say where great people want to come to work rather than it's a great place to work. And if you can provide opportunities for them and grow them and think about people, we are successful because of the 12,000 employees that we have at Adobe. We just help guide and shepherd them. So I think that's probably the most important thing. Everybody tells you it's about the people, but I think every year that goes by, I just realize how important that is.
Great. Shantanu, thank you for being here and sharing some insights with you, as we're here to celebrate some great people who have made huge contributions to the technology industry here in the state. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Brad.